December 20th, 1943. The skies over Bremen, Germany. A 19-year-old American pilot banks his P-51B Mustang hard left as tracer rounds slice through the air where his cockpit was half a second before. His hands are shaking so badly he can barely grip the stick. This is his first real combat engagement. The Messerschmitt Bf-19 on his tail is flown by a German veteran with 11 confirmed kills. This German ace has been hunting Allied pilots for 2 years. He knows every maneuver ever written in any tactics manual. He is already positioning for the killing shot. The American has 60 rounds of ammunition left. His fuel gauge is dropping fast. The nearest friendly aircraft is 3 miles away. By every calculation, he should be dead in the next 30 seconds. What the German pilot does not know is that this teenager is about to do something that violates every single rule in the fighter pilot handbook. Something so reckless and so counterintuitive that it will be dismissed as absolutely impossible by senior officers when he reports it later. Something that will accidentally revolutionize air combat for the next 80 years. But first, we need to understand why American fighter pilots were dying at catastrophic rates in the winter of 1943, and why the solution came from the most unlikely source imaginable. Welcome to History of World War II. This channel explores the untold stories and forgotten heroes who shaped the greatest conflict in human history. If you love deep research and documentary quality content, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you never miss an episode. Now let us go back to understand the crisis that made this moment possible. By December 1943, the United States Army Air Forces faced a crisis that threatened to destroy the entire strategic bombing campaign over Europe. The numbers were absolutely devastating. During the Schweinfurt-Regensburg raids in August 1943, the 8th Air Force lost 60 bombers in a single day. That is 600 young men killed or captured in just one mission. In October, another raid on Schweinfurt cost 62 more bombers. The loss rate exceeded 20% on deep penetration missions into German territory. Think about what that means for a moment. At this rate, bomber crews had virtually zero chance of surviving their required 25-mission tour. They were being sent on missions that mathematics said would kill them before they finished their duty. The problem seemed obvious to everyone. It was range. P-47 Thunderbolts and P-38 Lightnings could escort bombers to the German border, but they simply lacked the fuel capacity to penetrate deep into Reich territory. Once the escorts turned back, the Luftwaffe fighters would swarm the bomber formations like wolves descending on wounded prey. The solution seemed equally obvious. Develop long-range escort fighters. North American aviation had delivered the P-51B Mustang, which finally had the range to reach Berlin and back. Problem solved, right? Wrong. There was a second, more dangerous problem that nobody wanted to talk about. American fighter doctrine was fundamentally and completely flawed. The tactics manual written by senior officers who had learned to fly back in the 1920s emphasized formation, flying, and coordinated attacks above everything else. Fighter pilots were taught to maintain strict positioning at all times. Execute textbook maneuvers exactly as trained. Never ever break formation discipline under any circumstances. Individual initiative was not just discouraged, it was actively punished. The manual was treated as gospel. Questioning it was career suicide. Meanwhile, German pilots were destroying American fighters using a completely different philosophy. Luftwaffe doctrine had been refined through years of actual combat over Spain, Poland, France, and Russia. It emphasized aggressive individual initiative. German aces like Adolf Galland and Gunther Raoul had developed the finger for formation and energy fighting tactics that gave them enormous advantages in actual combat. The kill ratios told the brutal story. In late 1943, experienced Luftwaffe pilots were averaging 3 to 4 kills for every aircraft they lost. Some aces like Egon Meyer and Walter Nowotny had kill ratios exceeding 10 to 1. Let me ask you something. If you were a young American pilot in 1943 and you watched your friends die mission after mission while following the official tactics, would you start questioning those tactics? Would you trust that the senior officers knew best? Think about that as this story unfolds. American fighter commanders knew something was deeply wrong. After-action reports consistently showed American pilots being outmaneuvered and outfought despite flying aircraft with comparable or even superior performance. But the solution escaped them completely. More training in formation flying did not help. Neither did stricter adherence to the manual. Nothing worked. The consensus among senior officers was absolutely clear. American pilots needed better aircraft and more flight hours and stricter discipline. The tactics themselves were sound. The problem had to be execution. This assumption was about to be completely shattered by a teenager from West Virginia who had barely graduated from high school. The pilot who would change everything was not supposed to be anywhere near a fighter cockpit. He grew up in the Appalachian foothills during the darkest years of the Great Depression. His family was dirt poor. His father worked brutal hours in coal mines and natural gas fields just to keep food on the table. The boy hunted squirrels and rabbits from the time he could hold a rifle. It was not sport. It was survival. His family needed that meat. But all those years of hunting developed something invaluable: exceptional eyesight and hand-eye coordination that most pilots would kill for. He could spot a squirrel in a tree at 300 yards when other boys could not see it at 100. He enlisted in the Army Air Forces in September 1941 as an aircraft mechanic. He had no college education, no wealthy family connections, no prior flying experience of any kind. He was assigned to maintain P-39 Aurocabruce in Nevada. It's just another enlisted man turning wrenches. Then, in July 1942, the Air Forces faced a desperate crisis. The training pipeline simply could not produce pilots fast enough to replace the catastrophic combat losses. The service launched something called the Flying Sergeant Program, which allowed enlisted men to train as pilots without officer commissions. He volunteered immediately. His superiors were deeply skeptical. His educational background was marginal at best. His mechanical aptitude was excellent, but flying required split-second decision-making and spatial reasoning abilities that could not be taught. Most washout candidates came from exactly his demographic background. He proved every single one of them wrong. At flight school in California and Arizona, he demonstrated natural flying, ability that his instructors found absolutely remarkable. His vision was measured at 2010. That is twice as acute as normal human vision. He could spot enemy aircraft before anyone else in the entire formation even knew to look. He graduated in March 1943 and received his commission as a flight officer. By November 1943, he arrived in England assigned to the 363rd Fighter Squadron of the 357th Fighter Group. He had logged approximately 270 flight hours. Most of his squadron mates had college degrees from prestigious universities. Many came from wealthy families with connections. Some had private pilot licenses from before the war, giving them hundreds of extra flight hours. He was just the kid from West Virginia who talked with a thick Appalachian accent and lacked any kind of social polish. The other pilots were polite, but he could tell they did not expect much from him. He was assigned aircraft number 4,463,763, a P-51B Mustang that he named Glamorous Glen after his girlfriend back home. On December 20, 1943, he flew a bomber escort mission to Bremen. This is when everything in his life and in the history of aerial combat changed forever. The moment of insight came not from careful study or brilliant analysis or years of experience. It came from pure animal survival instinct when that German ace latched onto his tail and he realized, with absolute certainty, that he was about to die. The German fired a burst. Cannon shells ripped past the American S canopy close enough that he could have reached out and touched them. The German pilot was closing for the kill. positioning for a deflection shot that would shred the Mustang's engine and send the young American spiraling down to his death in a German farmer's field. His training screamed at him: maintain altitude, execute a standard evasive turn, try to reach friendly aircraft, stay high where the Mustang has performance advantages. Diving away from a Bf-109 was explicitly forbidden in the tactics manual. Everyone knew German fighters could outdive American aircraft. The 109's fuel-injected engine gave it enormous advantages in negative G maneuvers. Diving away from a 109 was suicide. Period. End of discussion. Every senior officer in the Army Air Forces would have told him the same thing. Instead, he did something completely insane. He rolled his Mustang inverted and pulled the stick back, diving nearly vertical toward the German countryside 7,000 feet below. The airspeed indicator spun wildly. It's past 400 miles per hour. It's past 450. The Mustang's wings began to buffet violently as the aircraft approached its structural limits. The controls grew heavier and heavier. The dive angle was so steep that his vision began to gray from the negative G-forces. Blood was rushing to his head. He was on the verge of blacking out. By every law of physics and every principle of fighter combat, he was committing suicide. But something completely unexpected happened. He screamed toward the earth at speeds that should have been impossible. The Mustang actually accelerated faster than the pursuing Bf-109. The airspeed hit 500 miles per hour. The controls felt nearly lock-solid from aerodynamic pressure. But the German rounds were falling behind. The Mustang was pulling away in a maneuver that every expert said could not work. At 1,500 feet, he hauled back on the stick with every ounce of strength in both hands. The G-forces slammed him into his seat so hard he thought his spine would snap. His vision tunneled to a tiny point of light. The Mustang's wings flexed upward, stressed nearly to the point of catastrophic failure. The aircraft bottomed out at 800 feet, traveling at 480 miles per hour, barely above the German treetops. The German pilot tried to follow. His Bf-109 pulled out at 600 feet, but the maneuver had bled off all his energy. His airspeed had dropped to just 320 miles per hour. The American leveled out, looked back, and saw something that should have been absolutely impossible. The German fighter that was killing him 30 seconds ago was now behind him, slow, vulnerable, desperately. Trying to regain speed and altitude, he reversed his turn, climbed slightly, positioned himself behind the Bf-109. At 400 yards, he fired a 3-second burst. 50 caliber rounds tore into the German fighter's wing root and fuselage. The Bf-109 rolled left, trailing thick black smoke, and spiraled toward the ground. The American had just executed what would later be called the high-speed yo-yo maneuver, the first recorded instance in combat aviation history. He did not know that was what it would be called. He did not even fully understand what he had done or why it had worked. He just knew he had survived when every calculation said he should have died. When he landed at his base in England and reported the engagement, his squadron commander's reaction was immediate and dismissive. That is absolutely impossible. The 109 outperforms us in every dive scenario. You must have misidentified the aircraft type. The intelligence officer's report was deeply skeptical. The gun camera footage was inconclusive because the dive had been too violent for the camera to track properly. Several senior pilots reviewed his account and dismissed it as confused memory from combat stress. A young pilot's imagination running wild after a terrifying engagement. "You cannot outdive a Messerschmitt," said the group operations officer firmly. "Their fuel injection system gives them decisive advantages in negative G maneuvers. This is established scientific fact. The doctrine is clear." If this story is changing how you think about innovation and questioning conventional wisdom, please hit that like button right now. It helps the algorithm show this video to more history lovers and takes less than 1 second of your time. The young pilot knew what he had experienced. But he was just a kid from West Virginia with barely any education, going up against senior officers who had been flying since before he was born. What would you do in that situation? Would you keep pushing back against people with far more authority and experience? Or would you accept that maybe you were wrong? I want to know your answer in the comments. But he was not alone for long. Over the next 3 weeks, other pilots began reporting similar experiences. Lieutenant William Wisner executed a near-vertical dive to escape to FW-190s and discovered the same phenomenon. At extreme speeds, the Mustang's performance characteristics changed in ways nobody had predicted. Captain Don Blakesley, commander of the 4th Fighter Group and one of the most experienced American pilots in the entire European theater, decided to investigate personally. On January 11, 1944, he took a P-51B up to 25,000 feet over the English Channel and executed a series of high-speed dive tests. The results were absolutely startling. Below 20,000 feet in dives exceeding 450 miles per hour, the Mustang accelerated faster than any German fighter. The two-stage supercharger that had been designed for high-altitude performance created completely unexpected advantages at high speed and low altitude. Blakesley wrote a detailed technical report and submitted it to 8th Fighter Command Headquarters. The response was immediate and hostile. At a commander's meeting on January 18, 1944, Blakesley presented his findings to the senior leadership. The room erupted in anger. Senior officers who had been flying since the 1920s were being told that fundamental assumptions they had built their entire careers on were completely wrong. German fighters have fuel injection. We have carburetors. Then Major General William Kepner, commander of 8th Fighter Command, stood up and intervened. Kepner was different from the other senior officers. He had learned to fly back in 1916. He had actually flown combat missions in World War I. He had watched too many young pilots die in this war, following tactics that clearly did not work. He was willing to challenge conventional wisdom if the evidence supported doing so. Gentleman Kepner said firmly, "I do not care if this contradicts everything we learned at tactical school. I care about one thing only: kill ratios. Captain Blakesley's group has the highest success rate in the entire theater. If his pilots are surviving by breaking the rules, then maybe our rules are wrong." Kepner ordered immediate, systematic testing. Over the next 2 weeks, test pilots put P-51Bs through extreme dive profiles under controlled conditions. The data confirmed everything Blakesley had reported. At speeds above 450 miles per hour, the Mustang's acceleration in a dive exceeded that of both the Bf-109 and the FW-190. On February 3, 1944, Kepner issued a directive that would change aerial combat forever. Fighter pilots were now authorized to use individual initiative and aggressive tactics, including high-speed diving attacks. Formation discipline was de-emphasized. Pilots were actively encouraged to exploit the Mustang's high-speed performance characteristics. The old guard was absolutely appalled, but Kepner had the authority, and he was not afraid to use it. The new tactics were put to the test immediately. On February 20, 1944, the 8th Air Force launched Big Week, a massive coordinated campaign to destroy German aircraft production once and for all. Over 1,000 bombers struck targets deep in Germany, escorted by P-51 Mustangs flying with Kepner's revolutionary new doctrine. If you are enjoying this deep dive into the forgotten stories that shaped World War II, please take a moment to subscribe to History of World War II. We spend dozens of hours researching each episode to bring you documentary quality content. Your subscription helps us continue this work and bring these incredible stories to more people around the world. The transformation in the air war was immediate and dramatic. In January 1944, before the new Tactics 8th Fighter Command, S-kill ratio against the Luftwaffe averaged just 2.1 to 1. Not bad, but not good enough to win air superiority. By April 1944, after widespread adoption of energy fighting tactics, the ratio climbed to 4.3 to 1. By June 1944, it reached an astounding 6.1 to 1. German pilots noticed the change immediately, and it terrified them. Oberleutnant Johann Steenhoff, a veteran ace with over 150 kills, wrote in his diary, "The American fighters have completely changed their approach. They no longer fly in rigid formations that we can predict and exploit. They dive from impossible altitudes at terrifying speeds that we cannot match. Our fuel-injected engines, which gave us such decisive advantages for so long, no longer matter. They are faster than us now in every way that counts." General Major Adolf Galland, commander of all German fighter forces, reported directly to Hermann Göring in April. 1944. The American Mustang pilots have somehow adopted our own energy fighting tactics and then improved upon them significantly. Their aircraft's high-speed performance exceeds our capabilities. We are losing irreplaceable, experienced pilots at a rate that simply cannot be sustained. The bomber crews noticed the transformation too. Survival rates improved dramatically almost overnight. Lieutenant James Howard, a B-17 pilot, wrote home to his family, "The fighter boys are completely different now. They do not just escort us passively anymore. They hunt. They actively seek out the German fighters and destroy them. The Germans are genuinely scared of them now. You can see it in how they approach the formations." One engagement from this period shows the new American dominance perfectly. March 3, 1944. The skies over Berlin itself. The young pilot who had started this revolution now had 12 confirmed kills. He was leading a flight of 4 Mustangs at 28,000 feet. Below them, 300 B-17 bombers were approaching the German capital. Luftwaffe fighters were rising to intercept. Bf-109s and FW-190s from JG-3 and JG-11, some of Germany's most elite fighter units. Oberleutnant Heinz, born ace with an almost unbelievable 170 kills, led a formation of Bf-109 G6 fighters. He spotted the American flight and began a climbing attack, planning to use his altitude advantage for a devastating diving pass on the bombers. The American saw them first. His exceptional vision gave him 30 seconds of warning that other pilots simply would not have had. Instead of maintaining formation and executing a coordinated defense as the old doctrine demanded, he did something that would have been absolutely forbidden just 3 months earlier. He rolled, inverted, and dove. Not away from the German fighters, but directly toward them, building enormous speed as he fell. His wingman, Lieutenant Clarence Bud Anderson, followed without a moment of hesitation. The other 2 Mustangs maintained high cover. Barr saw the Americans diving and assumed they were fleeing in panic. He adjusted his approach toward the bombers below. A rookie mistake that a pilot of his experience should never have made. This was exactly what the American wanted. At 600 miles per hour, a speed that made the controls feel like they were welded completely solid, the American pulled up underneath Boar's formation. The German Bf-109s were traveling at just 380 miles per hour, focused entirely on the bombers ahead. They never saw the Mustangs coming from below. The American fired a 2-second burst at the trailing 109. The German fighter exploded in a ball of orange flame. Barr broke hard left in desperation, but Anderson was already there firing. Burr's wingman went down trailing fire and smoke. The remaining 2 109s dove away in panic, abandoning their attack entirely. The American and Anderson did not pursue. They climbed back to altitude, using their massive speed advantage to regain position above the bombers in seconds. The entire engagement had lasted 45 seconds. 2 German fighters destroyed, 0 American losses. The bombers continued unmolested to their target. This pattern repeated across the skies over Germany day after day. American pilots using the new tactics achieved kill ratios that would have been dismissed as fantasy under the old doctrine. The Luftwaffe, accustomed to predictable American formations flying by the book, was suddenly facing aggressive individual attacks from completely unexpected angles and speeds. Here is a question I want you to think about. How many innovations throughout history have been rejected simply because they came from the wrong person? Someone too young, or too uneducated, or too inexperienced to be taken seriously. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. One more engagement deserves special attention. May 8, 1944. The skies over Brunswick. The American encountered his most challenging opponent yet. Hauptmann Georg Peter Eder, an ace with 36 confirmed kills. Flying a Bf 109 G10, which was the latest and most capable variant with significantly improved performance. The engagement began at 24,000 feet. Eder had the altitude advantage and he initiated a diving attack with the confidence of a pilot who had killed 36 enemies before. The American reversed into him, forcing a head-on pass. Both pilots fired, both missed. Eder expected the American to climb away, trying to regain altitude as the doctrine books said he should. Instead, the American rolled and dove nearly vertical building speed that seemed impossible. Eder followed, confident in his aircraft's legendary diving performance. The 109 had fuel injection after all. Everyone knew it could outdive any American fighter. At 550 miles per hour, the American pulled out and reversed his turn. Eder tried desperately to follow, but the G-forces were too severe. His vision grayed completely. His pullout was shallow and uncontrolled. When his vision cleared and he could see again, the American was behind him, 400 yards away. Guns aimed directly at his cockpit. The American fired. Eder's 109 took hits in the engine and wing. Smoke poured from the cowling in thick black clouds. Eder barely managed to nurse his shattered fighter back to his airfield. The aircraft was a total loss, written off completely. After the war, Eder wrote about this engagement. The American pilot who damaged my aircraft on May 8, 1944 executed maneuvers that I thought were physically impossible. He dove away from me, which should have been suicide, and somehow ended up behind me with a perfect firing solution. Our intelligence briefings had told us repeatedly that this could not happen. The physics did not allow it. We were completely and utterly wrong. By June 1944, the Luftwaffe was in total crisis. Experienced pilots who took years to train were being killed faster than they could possibly be replaced. Training programs were desperately shortened, producing poorly prepared pilots who often died on their very first combat missions before they could learn anything useful. The 8th Air Force had achieved complete air superiority over Germany. The skies belonged to America now. The human cost of this transformation was directly measurable in lives saved. Bomber loss rates dropped from over 20% in October 1943 to less than 4% by June 1944. Thousands upon thousands of aircrew members survived missions that they absolutely would have died on under the old tactics. After the war, a B-17 pilot named Robert Morgan tracked down the young American at an air show. Morgan had flown 30 missions over Germany in 1944. He told him something that still resonates decades later. My crew calculated that we should have been shot down on our 8th mission based on the 1943 loss rates. We flew 22 more missions after that. All of us made it home. My children exist because you figured out how to keep us alive. My grandchildren exist because of what you discovered. The impact extended far beyond World War II. The energy fighting tactics accidentally discovered by that young pilot and systematically validated by commanders like Blakesley became the absolute foundation of modern fighter doctrine. Every fighter pilot trained by Western Air Forces for the past 80 years has learned these principles. If you want to see more stories like this about forgotten innovations that changed history, please consider joining our Patreon community. Your support directly funds the research that makes these deep dives possible. The link is in the description below. The young pilot from West Virginia ended World War II with 11.5 confirmed kills. Cute? He was shot down once over occupied France. He evaded capture with help from the French resistance and made his way back to Allied lines. He returned to combat and flew 64 missions total. After the war, he became a test pilot. On October 14, 1947, he did something that had never been done before in human history. The techniques he had learned in desperate combat over Germany proved absolutely essential for supersonic flight. Energy management, high-speed control, aggressive maneuvering at the edge of what aircraft could physically survive. He retired as a brigadier general in 1975. He never once claimed to have invented energy fighting tactics. In his autobiography, he wrote with characteristic humility, "I was just trying not to die. If that helped other pilots survive, I am grateful. But I did not figure anything out. Reacted on instinct." The tactics he accidentally pioneered are still taught today in exactly the same form. Every fighter pilot in the United States, Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps learns energy fighting principles in their very first weeks of combat training. The P-51 Mustang, optimized for the tactics that young pilot helped develop, became the most successful American fighter of World War II. North American Aviation produced over 15,000 Mustangs. They destroyed 4,500 enemy aircraft in air combat, more than any other Allied fighter type in history. The 357th Fighter Group, his unit achieved the highest kill ratio of any American fighter group in the entire European theater, 5.7 to 1. They destroyed over 600 enemy aircraft while losing only 106 of their own. Their extraordinary success resulted directly from their early adoption of energy fighting tactics. Don Blakesley, who fought so hard to validate the young pilot's accidental discovery, retired as a colonel with 15.5 kills. He was recommended for the Medal of Honor 3 separate times. He never received it. In a 1989 interview, he said something profound. The real heroes were kids like him who figured things out when everyone with authority and experience told them they were wrong. I just happened to have enough rank to make sure people actually listened. William Kepner, the general who overruled his entire staff and authorized the new tactics, retired as a lieutenant general. His February 1944 directive is still studied at military academies around the world as a textbook example of leadership. The willingness to challenge established doctrine when the evidence demands it, even when that means admitting you were wrong. The German pilots who survived the war spoke with deep respect for their American opponents. Johann Steinhoff, who later became a general in the post-war German Air Force, wrote in 1977. By mid-1944, American fighter pilots had completely surpassed us in tactics and aggressiveness. They learned and adapted faster than we could possibly respond. The Mustang pilots especially. They were truly exceptional warriors. Here is what most people completely miss about this story. Innovation almost always comes from unexpected sources. A teenager from the hills of West Virginia with minimal formal education saw something that experienced officers with decades of training and thousands of flight hours had completely missed. The military system very nearly rejected his discovery entirely because it contradicted established doctrine. Because it came from someone without credentials or authority. How many other innovations throughout history have been lost because they came from the wrong person? Because they challenged assumptions that powerful people had built their careers defending. How many lives could have been saved in countless fields if organizations were better at recognizing truth regardless of where it comes from? The pilot at the center of this story died on December 7, 2020, at the age of 97. His obituary in the New York Times called him the most famous test pilot of his generation. It mentioned breaking the sound barrier. It mentioned his impressive combat record with 11.5 kills. It did not mention that he accidentally revolutionized air combat by doing something that every expert in the world said was absolutely impossible. That discovery saved more lives than anything else he ever did. Sometimes the greatest innovations in human history come not from careful planning and systematic research, but from desperate improvisation under impossible pressure. Not from credentialed experts following established procedures, but from outsiders who simply do not know what is supposed to be impossible. That young pilot did not set out to change military doctrine forever. He just wanted to survive his mission. That he did so by breaking every single rule in the book, and in the process saved thousands of lives, is what makes his story so remarkable. The next time someone tells you that something is impossible because it contradicts established wisdom, an expert consensus, remember the 19-year-old from West Virginia who was simply too inexperienced to know that he could not outdive a Messerschmitt. Sometimes not knowing the rules is exactly what allows you to break them. If this story changed how you think about innovation and the courage to challenge conventional wisdom, make sure to subscribe to History of World War II and hit that notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. And check out the video appearing on your screen right now for another incredible story of forgotten heroism that shaped the world we live in. I will see you in the next one.